Hello, my name is Wilma Bowers, and I am a JMU alum, volunteer, and chair of the Women for Madison Executive Action Council, and I'm honored to be today's moderator. Welcome to our over 500 participants. Mental health is a crucial topic normally, but with the pandemic, it has become an even more critical topic of discussion. We hope you leave this webinar in an hour learning more about how we can realize positive mental health for ourselves and for those around us. This webinar is brought to you as an outreach program from the Women for Madison initiative. Women for Madison is a movement at the intersection of two facts. Fact number one, 30% of JMU applicants are low-income students who without financial assistance cannot choose the Madison experience. Fact number two, the Women for Madison Executive Action Council, a group of JMU alums who identify as women, understand that together, a strong women's philanthropic movement can help to solve this problem. This spring, we are launching a bold new women's initiative. Stay tuned for more about how you can be part of this movement. While the Women for Madison organization is about creating opportunities through scholarships, today's mental health webinar has a special donation recipient, the JMU Counseling Center. As you can imagine, the center has been busy adapting their services to meet the higher need on campus for student support. You will receive information following this webinar about how you can support JMU students through a donation to the Counseling Center. No JMU student ever pays for counseling services through our center, but the current demand is outpacing our resources, and we have contracted with additional providers to meet the need. Every $100 raised will fund 3 to 5 hours of counseling services for our JMU students. A note of housekeeping. We will be accepting questions for our panelists throughout the next hour. Please type your question in the chat. We will not have time to answer all questions, but we will pick a few to benefit everyone, and the rest will be answered offline. After today's program, we will also be sending an email to everyone who registered for this event with a link to the recording for the program, a list of mental health resources, and other important information. Now I'd like to introduce you to our expert panelists. Catherine Malloy is an associate professor and director of the Writing, Rhetoric, and Technical Communication undergraduate program at JMU. She's also the founder of the JMU Neurodiversity Celebration Collaborative, addressing the negative attitudes, misconceptions, and around mental health. Angela Russell, JMU class of 1985, is a licensed psychotherapist and certified life coach and retreat leader, and my peer on the Women for Madison Executive Action Council. Katrina Simpson McCleary is the Associate Director for the JMU Counseling Center, their Clinical Services Division, and is also a licensed clinical psychologist. And Michelle Pineda Hernandez, JMU student, class of 2022, a current psychology major and a JMU Centennial Scholar. Thank you to each of you for volunteering your time for today's important program. I'd like to start with some important background information about mental health. Catherine, can you please share with us some of your research and insights about mental health?
Hello, thank you, Wilma, and thank you everyone for attending, and to the rest of the planning committee for inviting me to participate in this webinar. Unlike the rest of the panel who will bring you a needed clinical perspective, I bring an interdisciplinary one. As a rhetoric of health and medicine scholar, I study stigma and bias and how they interfere with quality care. My work focuses on patients' perspectives, patient empowerment, and self-advocacy. At the heart of my research is the fact that everyday language choices have consequences, and that stigma and bias lead to inadequate care for mental health and beyond. According to the World Health Organization, mental health is more than just the absence of mental disorder or disabilities. Instead, it refers broadly to a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. As such, multiple social, psychological, and biological factors determine the level of mental health of a person at any point in time. Just as with physical health, then, your mental health is not a fixed state. It's constantly in flux as a person grows and changes and navigates the various large and small pleasures and challenges that characterize human life. Currently, we are facing a serious challenge. As we find ourselves in the throes of a rapidly unfolding, yet also dauntingly stagnant pandemic, experts are detecting another pandemic, a mental health pandemic, developing in its wake. In a new CDC survey, in fact, 18 to 24-year-olds reported extraordinarily high levels of depression and anxiety, and a quarter of them reported that they've seriously considered suicide. Working mothers are also suffering greatly, and undoubtedly, the toll the pandemic is taking on mental well-being is most acutely felt for those whose lives have been most upended. Research has clearly shown that gender, race, and socioeconomic status determine how much suffering you can expect to endure at this challenging time. This is not all that surprising, as crises like pandemics often exacerbate existing inequalities. This presents a number of challenges, yet it is also a time for us to come together and to realize that we are all responsible for promoting mental well-being. My research shows how ordinary people become extraordinary self-advocates in health and medical contexts, in the ways that we talk about mental health, in the ways that we seek out assistance for ourselves, and the ways that we are open about the help we need. We can help other people to feel better about their own need to do so. For example, check in with those who are grieving the loss of a loved one. Reach out to those who have lost jobs and income. Offer to listen to people who have had to cancel important life events due to the pandemic. Offer to connect with people in your community regularly, even if that is only possible in online groups. Taking these proactive steps requires an attunement to barriers to care, and some have emerged due to social distancing guidelines and lockdowns. Yet a more insidious and familiar barrier to care continues to plague efforts at providing mental health care: stigma. Stigma is often characterized as either enacted stigma or episodes of discrimination, or self-stigma, also sometimes called felt stigma or shame. Among the barriers to effective treatment for mental health concerns, the existence of enacted and self-stigmas are specific contributing factors that inhibit health-seeking behaviors. Likewise, while there is no shortage of initiatives designed to lessen stigma, these are not always impactful as we would hope they would be. So what can we do? Diagnosing mental illnesses involves complex clinical decision-making, and needing mental health support doesn't always mean that you fit into a diagnostic category or that you are officially diagnosable with a mental disorder. One thing to remember is that the process of diagnosing mental health problems is highly subjective. It is completely normal to feel overwhelmed, anxious, or depressed due to the things going on in this world. And this session will cover self-care advice for anyone to try out as we all navigate maintaining mental well-being during charged and challenging times. That said, if you find that your day-to-day functioning is excessively impacting and you are having trouble living the life you want to live due to mental health struggles, you should seriously consider seeking out clinical services. So I introduce these realities to get us started, that while mental health is often discussed in relation to mental illnesses or mental health issues or problems, mental health actually refers to psychological and emotional well-being in general. That mental health is fluid and can shift and change, just as your physical health can shift and change, and that stigma, both enacted and felt, can create barriers to care. Destigmatizing mental illness is a complex endeavor, yet you all have taken an important step toward being a part of the solution by taking a part in this discussion today. Let's talk about it and show others that it's okay to talk about mental health. Thank you. I'm going to pass it on to the next speaker here.
Thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate that background information. Now I'd like to ask Angela and then Katrina, as clinical professionals, what changes in mental health patterns have you seen as a result of the COVID pandemic?
Thank you, Wilma, for that question, and thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this panel. I'm so excited to talk about mental health. Obviously, a lot has happened in the last year with our sense of stability being challenged by the COVID-19 crisis, in addition to the issues related to social justice. But what we found is that more people are suffering from mental health issues than physical or financial. I personally have found that there's an increase in in anxiety, depression, grief, and loss. And a lot of churches now have begun to contact me so that we can have some group sessions because there are many people who may be passing away around them. I have some clients who have had a heightened level of anxiety because they have their own underlying medical conditions that could make the COVID, if they were to get COVID, even worse for them. So they are afraid or even paralyzed to leave the house, having things delivered to them as opposed to going outside. And I've even found that many people are having discord within their relationships because there is a wide variety of belief of how severe the COVID crisis is for some people. Some people believe in it, some people don't. Some people don't wear masks and things like that. Lastly, it's impacted relationships in that people are home more, they're teleworking more, and that is making or breaking their relationships.
Yeah. Katrina, how about you? Let's weigh in.
I really appreciate, and I feel like there's so much connection between what we see in the community that Angela was talking about and what we see on JMU's campus. Kind of reflecting on the COVID-19 pandemic, and then in tandem with that, we have a socio-political environment that is emphasizing social injustice and the impact of centuries of injustice and oppression. There's so much going on, and how as people, particularly as women, can our mental health and well-being not have been impacted? Not one of us is immune to feeling less connected, a sense of loss from either death or missed opportunities, overwhelmed by shifting responsibilities, the anxiety over lack of financial instability, either felt or perceived potential. And so we have students that are coming in to the center and coming back to campus, potentially looking at the reality that their financial situation at home has changed, or there's greater instability financially. And so we do see this when people are coming into the center, they're noting an increase in concern around financial stability. In particularly, we see that more in our students of color, looking at Black and African American students. And so they're their ability to even have access to academics is at risk. So you have that. The college students are not escaping. You know, when we look at, there's a fall survey that Active Minds did of 2,000 students. 80% of those indicated that their mental health had been impacted. 20% said significantly impacted, and that was in the fall. So as you think about this time that has progressed, we went through the holidays, there's these pieces, we've had the national election, there's so much that is compounding how people are doing right now. And so when we look at the fall semester at the center, what we're seeing that students are indicating are the most impacted areas by COVID-19 are areas of mental health, loneliness and isolation, academics, and relationships. And we know that people's mental health impacts their ability to stay at JMU and to be academically successful. So coming in and connecting is paramount to that. Some of the ways that we've adapted our services, Wilma, would be that we moved all of our services to telehealth. So there's greater accessibility for students, regardless of where they are right now. As long as they're in Virginia, we can provide them services. We've also expanded our group opportunities and our treatment programs. We have one called Nope to Cope now that is all about dealing with COVID-19. And so we have these resources that are available to students. We've also put out a lot of information so that people don't even have to come through the door. And so if you go to our JMU website, you can find self-help resources for COVID-19. There's the self-care package that went out via Duke's Weekly, which those of us connected to JMU definitely know what the Duke's Weekly is. We've put that out there on blast. We've also let people know that we contracted with an external service to continue to provide 24/7 emergency coverage services to students regardless of where they live. And so that has been powerful. And so what we finally, like to summarize, we had an increase in the need prior to COVID-19. nationally, there was an impact on people seeking out services. There was so much happening that people were not coming into the center as often in the fall. What that allowed us to do is serve those individuals that had mental health concerns that are now compounded by social injustice or COVID-19 or COVID-19, right? Because we live in a both and world. And so we were able to see those people for longer periods of time. We're now seeing an increase in that. And that reflects very much what Catherine was acknowledging. The next pandemic is going to be a mental health pandemic. And we will see a significant increase in those individuals reaching out for services. And that's why I'm so grateful to Women for Madison for highlighting the counseling center and our fund, because those funds are going to allow us to reach more students and provide more students more services for a longer period of time. And so thank you again for inviting us.
Absolutely. And for those of you who do not have a student at JMU or are not a student at JMU, we're going to talk in a bit about resources that are available to the general public. I'd like to, though, include our student in this discussion. Michelle, you're a psychology major. You are there on campus. Are you hearing things similar to this from your family and friends? And if so, as a psychology major, do you feel that you are offering more support to people?
Yeah, so much. A lot of the things that Katrina mentioned, I have definitely seen in my peer group in general. I've seen changes in the lack of sense of purpose, a lack of motivation, at times feeling unloved or unworthy. And unfortunately, the reality for a lot of students is that JMU is an escape from their home. And being forced to be put in a position where you have to pack up your bags and go back to a place that may or may not be safe for you can definitely impact your motivation behind schoolwork or how you're connecting with your peer group. Fortunately, I have had amazing professors throughout this whole entire situation that have really led the example of what practicing mental health looks like. I've had professors constantly tell my classmates, tell us, make sure you're doing something for yourself today. Make sure that you're putting away your computer, putting down your books, go exercise, journal, listen to music. And when I first started hearing those pieces of advice, it was kind of hard to really want to do it. It kind of felt pointless. But after some reflection and seeing my professors lead by example, I started practicing self-care methods. And then once I felt like I was in a place that I was good, I made sure that I was taking the time to ask my friends, my family members, hey, what did you do for mental health today? You should go on a walk. Have you called your family members? Have you talked to your friends? If you need a friend to talk to, I'm here. And that's just been something that I've been doing throughout this situation.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. And for our audience, I hope that you are tuning into the fact that we're using JMU a bit as a microcosm of the larger society. Certainly, I would imagine that most of us on this call are hearing what's happening on the campus and extrapolating that to what's happening in our own life and our own communities with our own family and friends. But there is hope. And I'd like to turn now to Angela and Katrina, our clinical professionals. And what advice what advice can you give us to be hopeful during this challenging time?
Well, for me, I will say to limit your the amount of social media. Social media for a while there was just driving me crazy. So the unfortunate part is that the platform is not always used for positive reinforcement. So for those people, some people need to be connected to social media. I understand that. But if you find that that is negatively impacting you, take a look at it and figure out how you can limit that, even with the news. The other thing that I would suggest is to change your identify those things that you can't change. In this society with everything that's going on, we can really feel like we're overwhelmed with all the things that we cannot change. One thing in particular, with those people who are going to work, they had a transition period, right? Now that we're in our teleworking time, you had that time driving to work to get in your car, listen to a podcast, listen to the radio, or to sing, whatever it was, to get yourself ready to go to work. Now you leave home, you leave your bed, you take a shower, maybe, and you just go to your workstation. So maybe one of the things that you can do is change your transition situation. Like for me, I know that I still do my meditation in the morning. I do my Bible study in the morning. I do all of those things so that I can ready myself for work. And then I take my breaks. I step away from the computer, even if that means going downstairs or going to the kitchen or to the living room or whatever, watching TV, sitting down, actually having a meal instead of eating in front of your computer. Take your breaks. Give yourself permission to take your breaks.
Yeah, great advice. Katrina, how about you?
Yeah, I feel like Michelle and Angela have given so much great information already. I mean, Michelle highlighted that we need to take care of ourselves first so that we can give to other people. And I think that includes, there's this tension, I think, right now for those of us that are committed to social justice about stepping away from social media and what does that speak. And I think Michelle, in saying that, like, we need to take care of ourselves to be able to do what we're passionate about to the best of our abilities. Like I have a number of roles that are important to me. I'm a mama, and that is incredibly important to me. And I will tell you what, I do not spend 24/7 with my kids. Like, I need to step away. I need that time to myself so that I can go and be the best mom. I have a job. Angela and I are gifted with our job, right? We hold stories, we hear stories. We're empowering people to find their resilience, to find ways to connect and cope. That's a beautiful thing that we've been blessed with. And if we want to do that to the best of our abilities, we need to take care of ourselves. We need to do the things that she's talking about, that meditation, that time to connect with people. And so I feel like there's been so much already shared with that. I think I would even say, like, first, I hope what you're hearing is you're not alone. Like, you're not. Second, given the experiences that we're having in this world right now, struggling makes sense. We're going to have an impact on our mental and physical well-being. Third, we can make a positive impact on ourselves, which then does help us to help and connect with other people. And I kind of break it down. Angela was hitting on really what I look at as far as well-being. I attend to the physical well-being, emotional well-being, social well-being, work or school, and then finally spiritual, which is that being connected to something larger than ourselves. Hit on those things every day, a couple of them every day, small things. Drink more water, get some sort of movement each day, take steps to take care of yourself. Like, you could literally, for some students, spend all day in their bed, right? Get up and brush your teeth. Get up and take a shower, wipe off, change into a different pair of leggings or jeggings or whatever you're wearing. Like, do those pieces. Finally, we have access. Anybody that has a JMU email account, by the way, has access to TEL, which is the therapist assisted online resource. You just go to the counseling center link and you can tap on TEL. That's a free online resource that's available. And then also on our resource page for the general population, we have so many community resources available, so many self-care options. And so find those things that fit for you and do those.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you. We are now going to start coalescing some of your questions from the audience. And while our support team is filtering through those questions, I'd like to ask our student panelist, Michelle, a question. We've talked about Women for Madison is all about opening doors through scholarships, and we've talked about what a huge stressor finances can be for students and for families around the ability to pay for a college education. Michelle, you're a JMU Centennial Scholar recipient. Please share with us what that scholarship has meant to you.
So I'd like to start by providing some brief context. My childhood home included just my mom and I, and she is an immigrant, and I am a first generation student. And so with those identities, we faced a lot of obstacles. Um, During high school, I didn't necessarily understand the impact that academics would have on my life and the types of doors that going to college could open for me. So once I reached my senior year during college application season and I reflected on my grades from earlier years, I wasn't doing so hot because I didn't understand the gravity of what those grades could impact um, or could have an impact on me later on. Uh, Fast forward, I received the Centennial Scholarship. And when I first heard about it, it was years before the college application process. And I said to myself, all right, Michelle, you have to work towards this, because the sad reality in my situation was that if I didn't receive any financial help, I wouldn't be attending college. I would either probably graduate and be juggling a full-time job to pay off student debt, or just not be able to go to college. And Centennial Scholarship, the Centennial Scholarship has truly given me the opportunity to just be a student. I'm fortunate enough to not have to worry about the financial stressors at college or at home. I'm fortunate enough to meet other students who had similar instances during their childhood and who I could talk to when I'm feeling kind of bad on campus. I'm fortunate enough to be able to receive not only financial help, but academic help, mental help, personal help. Um, the Centennial Scholarship really goes above and beyond to really make sure that every single one of their students is succeeding at JMU. And it doesn't matter what instance that you're in, where you're from, how tall you are, how much money you had when you were at home. They want to make sure that you graduate James Madison University. And I truly wouldn't be sitting where I'm at today without the help of a scholarship. I wouldn't be majoring in psychology. I wouldn't have been able to live the typical um, college experience that every student gets to live through. I was fortunate enough to live on campus for free and be able to experience the good and the bad that comes with that, and just live my life as a college student in the United States. And I'm the first one to do that in my family. And there's a lot of other students who are the first ones to do that in their family. And with that comes a lot of weight. But because of the scholarship, I've been able to enjoy it all. And I just remember the day that I received the yes and calling my mom, and the waterworks just started flowing, because scholarships not only impact the student's life, but it also impacts their family's life, their guardians. Because if you come from financial hardships, it has an impact on everyone, your younger siblings, your oldest siblings, your parents. And not only was it a weight lifted off my shoulders, but it was also a weight lifted off my mom's shoulders, because she felt like her daughter finally received the opportunity to be able to do something beyond the laborious jobs that unfortunately a lot of immigrants have to work, and that a lot of other people do not want to work. Um, so if there are students or family members here today who are listening, if you know, if you have a friend, if you have a daughter, a son who is in need of financial help to be able to attend college, make sure that you are really seeking out all the resources possible. And Centennial Scholarships is one of those resources that could definitely help you.
Thank you, Michelle. You make JMU proud. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from James Madison, that knowledge is liberty, and creating an environment where our students can thrive is so important. So we're going to turn now to our audience questions. Often people want to seek mental health support, but do not have the money to afford it. What options exist for the public if you have no money for mental health clinical support, or mental health support isn't readily available in your community?
This is such an important question. Thanks, Wilma. And we were chatting a bit before the webinar started, and I had mentioned that there's the Community Services Board here in Harrisonburg. And then Kenny filled me in that also these kinds of nonprofits exist in other locales throughout Virginia and beyond. So certainly there are acute services and services for chronic mental health conditions that are free of charge in most communities. And in Harrisonburg, those are offered through the Community Services Board, which I'll put a link to that in the chat, and I'll pass it on to the clinical experts for further advice on this.
Angela, what's your advice?
Well, I know in the state of Maryland, there's an organization that's called the Pro Bono Project that provides services for free. Also, Medicaid has uninsured insurance for those people who don't have insurance. They will cover mental health insurance for those people. The other thing is for those people who are working, check to see if your place of employment has an EAP program. An EAP stands for Employee Assistance Program, and many times that covers your children. That is a service where you can get therapy or sessions, maybe 6 to 8 sessions for free. And I know sometimes the place of employment may have 24-hour service. So if you call that number, sometimes those agencies will have an opportunity for you to speak with someone at no cost at any time of the day. The other thing is that some insurances or some locales, some places in the community may have like a sliding scale. So instead of paying for the full rate, they may give you a discounted rate. And lastly, what was the other one? The 24-hour crisis hotline. And insurances. Some insurances, if you have Aetna or Blue Cross Blue Shield or something like that, some insurances are paying 100% for your the rate instead of you having a copay, because the copay could be just as much as could take you under, just like regular expense. So you can try those things.
Great. Thank you.
I can share too, just to tap into some of what Angela was sharing and Catherine as well. Some places offer what are called sliding scale fees. And so what that means is they adjust their fees depending upon what you can afford. And so you can find those, you can do a search. One website that we refer to a lot is psychologytoday.com. They have a find a therapist search. You can actually check off the insurance, you can check off gender, provider, interest, things like that. And one of them is you can look for individuals that have a sliding scale fee and see what might be available. And so those sliding scale fees can go as low as $10 a session or to around 25 or 35. So that's something too that people may not know is available.
Okay. Thank you, Katrina. I thought it was a new learning for me that the Community Services Board and access to free mental health, should you need it, is available throughout the state of Virginia. And I want to really emphasize that point. Okay, our next question from the audience is, I see many struggling with apathy that prevents self-care. What tips do you have for staying healthy when anything seems daunting? Angela, you want to take that one?
When anything seems daunting.
Like you're in the well, you're just in the bottom of the well. How do you find the fortitude to get self-care?
Well, the thing that comes to mind is when you're in the airplane and the airplane is going down, that one of the first things that they say is to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. So if you're in that well, understand that, especially now that we're in COVID, that everyone is affected. Everyone is impacted in some way. And if in that moment you're not doing well, remember that it's just a moment, but not allow yourself to go past that time, right? If you're in that well, understand that this too shall pass. I can get through this. force yourself to get up and brush your teeth, as Katrina said, or change your leggings or something like that. It's like, understand that this too shall pass. You'll be okay. You'll get over it. Pick up the phone, call someone. You know, there was one other thing that I wanted to say. Extend some grace to yourself. Understand that if you're not able to do those things that you weren't able to do before, that's okay. It's really okay. Sometimes I think we have such expectations of perfection for ourselves that we don't give ourselves a break. Breathe, breathe,
Yep.
breathe.
Be your own best friend.
Right, be your own best friend. And if the S on your chest shrinks, it's okay.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. Next
really,
question. Oh, Katrina, please.
No, I was going to connect a little bit with what Angela was sharing, in that piece of, we, as women, we can put so much on ourselves. And in this pandemic, that has increased and enhanced. And, you know, when we look at how oftentimes we're socialized, it's to put other people first, it's to do. And so at the end of the day, we can be left with empty barrels. And so we're looking for those small things that we can do to increase that. One of the things that we know is that we're hardwired oftentimes to remember the tough stuff. Kind of helps us survive. It doesn't help us feel good though. And so one of the things that we can do that's really simple and does not take a lot of energy is to write down 3 to 5 things that we are grateful for each day. If you're a faith person, plug that into your prayers and express appreciation for that. Over time, that really can change how we are seeing things and improve our mood. So that is something small that takes really a small amount of effort.
Right. And I think there's actually been research done that if you do keep a gratitude journal or express gratitude to at least 3 things, like kind of soak on a little bit every day, that it does increase positive mental health.
Yes.
There's a lot of apps too, by the way, available, gratitude journals that are free.
Mm-hmm.
Will prompt you every day to do this. So that's another tool.
Absolutely.
Next audience question. What would be some pointers or tips for teenagers, maybe a little younger than the college age, going to school but not getting the same social interaction because they're not allowed to socialize in groups or have to wear masks every day, etc. So for that teen group, what advice would we have? Who'd like to take that question?
I can start, but I also want to honor Angela and I are here as experts in mental health, but we're all experts in living and in our own lives. And so I think Michelle and Catherine and Wilma also have a lot to provide as far as that goes. So to put that out there too, because also as women, we can discount what we have. And so I want to reflect on that. I think one of the things that I've seen be helpful is find those people. If you do have those connections, be intentional and continuing to hold on to those and looking for ways, it's not ideal, but virtual opportunities to engage with people that have similar shared interests. So that's one of these beautiful things that social media has provided for us, is that we can find those folks. And so to find those ways to connect, I really do think that encouraging our students to get out, to get outside, bundle up, do that, spend some time walking around, and that change of perspective can really be something that is healthy. That's something that my daughter just entered into high school, right? What a great way to start high school in a pandemic, but this is what so many of us have done. And one of the things that we really connected on is that walk every day just shifts things. It helps with that mental health and well-being. And so those are some of those points. And again, remember, it is temporary. Things will shift. we are having the vaccine being delivered, we will get back to life and that opportunity to reconnect. And so that is something that myself that I've remembered, like someday I'm going to be able to hug people without worrying again. Like it's going to happen.
Right.
And that means a lot to me.
And I know that's really hard, especially for younger people, to see the long view. And I think that's our role as a parent, to try to constantly reinforce to our children that they are loved. As Angela said, this too shall pass. But that's a hard concept to understand when you're a young person. And I know it's stressful for parents as well. Another question that came up was, how does mental health present itself differently in men versus women? Angela, do you want to share a perspective on that based on your experience?
Wow. I'll say, first of all, that men might be more short with you. They'll get angry, more argumentative, or aggressive. Women may be more isolated, sad. Yeah, I would say more isolated, sad. You might see a change in the way they dress, not as not keeping themselves up as much, not talking, not answering the phone. But that can also happen with women. I mean, with men. I have one client in particular who is really having a hard time verbalizing how he's feeling, because he's internalizing it. So it's actually manifesting in his health, because he's having more, he has some medical issues. So he's having more flare-ups now because he's not talking as much. And overeating.
Is that for both men and women? Do you see that?
Well, that could be either one. I think that I have one client in particular who's now, one female client who's overeating now because of COVID, and she's not leaving the house as much, and she's snacking more and things like that. But that can in fact happen with men too. But I think more so, I see that depression manifests in men through anger a lot of times.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway there is not to assume that men and women react the same way in mental health.
Exactly.
Katrina?
There's so much that impacts that, right? Across identities, so across genders. And so what we know is oftentimes there's more in-group difference than between group difference. I do think some of the things that Angela talked about, it speaks the truth and speaks about society and how we're socialized, right? So men are not socialized. It starts at like the age of 3 that we stop using emotion-focused words with boys to describe. And so it's this action focus. And so anger tends to be one that's more socially acceptable. I think that we see more discussion of physiological complaints with men. I think you also see that too in marginalized racial identity groups, that they're going to be talking more about physical pain because that's more acceptable to reflect on. And so that can also be a cue. Like if someone's talking about being tired all the time or their back hurts a lot, those are some things that might be a sign that they're holding on to some things as well. And we do see that in women and other genders, but I would say that's something that we definitely see. And when we look at those intersecting identities, I think that that's incredibly important when we think about how things might come out and be shared.
I think that's really, really an important conversation, not only in terms of relationships, but also in terms of your family members, to recognize that it manifests itself differently in all people. Our next audience question is, what is your recommendation for individuals who do not normally feel anxiety about COVID and circumstances related to COVID, but end up feeding off the constant bombardment of family members' immense, potentially irrational fear and anxiety that they endlessly communicate to you? Sounds like this person needs some help. Maybe they're not feeling the stress of COVID, but they're surrounded by people who do. How does this person show grace in the face of this conflicting scenario?
I can start, I think, first off, expressing your boundaries. So, right? Thank you, Angela. Like, we as women can struggle to assert our boundaries. It feels mean and not nice. But the reality is, if it's impacting us, then we have a right to express that. As does the other person, to talk about their struggles, but there needs to be that mutual respect. And so it is okay to say to a friend, like, can we switch focus right now? Like, this is not benefiting me. Maybe we can talk about something else. To be able to say that to somebody, to express what we need, can really help with that. If they continue to push on that, then it gives you more of an ability to say, like, okay, I've expressed what I need right now. If you cannot attend to that, maybe there's somebody else in your life that is better suited to talk through this. But this is not feeding my soul right now, and it's making things worse for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I totally agree. I was thinking we have to understand our limitations also. If we can't take it, if we don't have the capacity to carry someone else's weight, we have to let it go. We have to.
Right. So Angela, stay unmuted for a moment because I'm going to throw the next question to you, and it's somewhat related.
Okay.
What I just heard you say is that if you're feeling bombarded by friends or family that are feeling overwhelmed, you clearly want to help what you can, but when you're starting to feel like you can no longer help or you're overloaded, you need to set the boundaries. So it lends itself to the next question. What is your advice? This is coming from the audience. What is your advice to talking to a loved one about them seeking help because they are struggling? Often this person says, I find it a difficult conversation because of perceived or believed stigma. And I'd like, Angela, if you could talk for just one quick minute, and then Catherine may want to weigh in on this too, the stigma part.
Well, I think I first talk about the change that I see and how concerned I am about that change. Whatever, I'd identify whatever that change is, tell them how concerned I am, and also how it affects me, right? And then talk about, I think for me, because I'm a therapist, it's always easy for me to go in the wells with people, but sometimes that is not so easy for people who aren't comfortable with emotion. But to help them to feel safe enough to tell you what's going on with them and to open that dialogue, because sometimes if they're able to tell you what's going on, that might be enough. But if it's not enough, then say, well, maybe you need to get some help because this is what I see. And that's not who you were. So what's going on? And let's do it together. Do you need me to call with you? Do you want me to go with you? Because sometimes people are afraid. I mean, a lot of people don't know what to expect when contacting a therapist or talking to a therapist. So let me go with you. You're not by yourself.
Catherine, in the last couple of minutes that we had left, I'd love for you to talk about, that stigma does keep people from seeking help. Can you talk a little bit about what we can do individually, either for that loved one or for ourselves, to get past that stigma?
Absolutely, Wilma. And I think one important thing that you can do if you're talking with someone and you believe that they are stigmatizing mental health problems and thus they don't want to be part of that group. And so it's threatening to them to say, I think you need to talk to a therapist, because they think that you are diagnosing them. And so one thing to do is to sort of normalize it as much as possible. One thing that I've done myself is to say, I don't have any diagnosed mental illnesses, and yet every few years I do need a tune-up with a therapist, and that's a totally normal thing. So helping people to see that just as you would do certain things to maintain your physical well-being, that there are things that you also can do to maintain your mental well-being, and that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a diagnosable mental illness. And maybe the person does, to be fair, but the thing is that helping them to see it as a normal thing that any person would be able to do at any point in their life. And then especially during COVID times, to say, look, exactly as Angela said quite eloquently, we are all struggling, every single person. I emphasized in the intro that we are struggling to varying degrees, just to sort of emphasize that some people are bearing a heavier burden due to demographic factors, socioeconomic factors, that they're struggling worse. But to say, like, look, it's so normal. We've had this unprecedented thing happen to our world. None of us saw it coming. We're coping as best we can. It's completely normal to need some help, and maybe you need some help. And just helping them to see that talking with a therapist isn't signing on for a lifetime of a mental health diagnosis, and it's not taking Prozac tomorrow. It's simply having a conversation with someone with expertise in dialoguing with a person to help them to feel better. So, and I think that can go a long way in destigmatizing it, just emphasizing how normal it is. And I can't say enough that if we ourselves seek out clinical services, it's really important to share that in everyday conversations, so that people will realize that it's a normal thing to do, and not always something that's happening because you are in a crisis moment. It can be something that you're doing because you, or as Angela said, your loved ones are saying, like, hey, you don't really seem like yourself right now. I think you should maybe talk to somebody. And keeping it at the level of talking to somebody, I think, can be a really helpful way. And to say, look, Angela and Katrina, these are experts that have really great advice to give you that's beyond what I can give you as your loved one or friend. And I sure would love you to be able to get that advice, to get that support at this time.
Yep, I think that's an excellent point. I would like to ask each of you, and I'll start with Michelle, if you're willing. Michelle, I know Michelle, for those of you who don't know, the JMU campus is closed today because of the severe weather, and Michelle wasn't going to be able to stay with us this whole time. But since she's here, I really want to ask her, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists to start to conclude our hour by giving your top piece of hopeful advice. Michelle, love for you to start.
Yes, I would say that it is incredibly important to prioritize your mental health in the midst of all of the unpredictability. We cannot help others or contribute to our work if we do not take the time to help ourselves.
I think that's incredibly important. I'm going to move to Angela.
I would say that taking care of your mental health includes a healthy level of selfishness. Women in particular are ones that are taught to take care of everyone else. So if we can put ourselves first, and then say, okay, now what can I do for you? But let me do me first, because we're then teaching people how to treat us, right? I think that if we realize how important our own mental health is, we can be better wives, friends, mothers, and all of that. So take care of yourself. Healthy selfishness.
I'm going to move to Catherine next, because I want to play kind of, Catherine, I know you have something that you want to share, but I also want to take what Angela just said and reflect on, I'd like for you to share your advice, but also that notion of women being so strong and stoic. So Catherine, what is your piece of advice?
My advice would be to cultivate self-compassion, and to have compassion for yourself, to be gentle with yourself to the extent that that's possible, because a lot of our own mental health distress can be related to just being way too hard on ourselves. And I think that it aligns up beautifully with Angela's point, to be selfish about your mental well-being, and also to show yourself the compassion that you would show a friend, which is what Kristen Neff talks about in this website that's on this slide, to take it easy on yourself.
And how about the notion of women being so stoic and not wanting to seem weak?
I'd like to
Angela.
address that real quick. Women, I think we pride ourselves in having a big S on our chest. Dun, 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 the woman came to save the day. When we realize that our S is really this big, then we're okay. When we realize that we can't do everything for everybody, and that we need to create some boundaries and healthy boundaries, we allow other people to learn how to take care of themselves instead of them coming to us all the time.
Yep. So there are real benefits to that, and I really appreciate you emphasizing that.
I also think real quick, it's important to acknowledge too that there are messages that we are blasted with every day to have that large S. And I think there's family messages, there's cultural messages. I think for those of us that identify from marginalized communities, that you have to be better, stronger than the next person, the person that's in the majority. And so I want to honor that, because we are talking about battling some things that are very real experiences and also messages that we've received. And so society needs to catch up too. I think the other piece that I would want to share as far as to jump on the question is, I think we must be diligent in our search for hope. Seek out people and experiences that bring us joy, that remind you that there's light in this world. I'm fortunate enough to find these both in my office with my incredible colleagues and at home with my family. We laugh every single day, and that brings me hope.
I think that is a beautiful way to then conclude by saying, I want to thank and honor each of you for volunteering your time to share this important message with the, again, I'll state, more than 500 people who registered for this event, which I think is telling of how important a topic it is. And to the audience, again, JMU will be sending each of you a follow-up email with important information, but we're also going to ask you what you liked and what you disliked about this program, and what other topics you'd like to see offered through the Women for Madison series of webinars. There will also be a link with mental health resources, as well as a link for how you can support the JMU Counseling Center and the Women for Madison initiative. I want to thank each of you for participating today, for taking care of yourselves, for actually, you should applaud and pat yourself on the back for taking an hour out of your day today to participate in this important event. Be well and go Dukes.